Captain Harlan Crow seized Maya Ellison's wrist right there in front of 300 guests at the biggest charity gala in Washington, D.C. The young black waitress stood caught between them, treated like an animal. "Let go of me," she said, voice steady. "I have a badge. Shut your mouth." "That bracelet costs more than your whole life," he snapped. The sharp click of handcuffs followed. "Who'd you take it from?" "It was my mother's," Maya answered. Her mother's delicate gold bracelet was crushed beneath cold steel. 300 of the city's most powerful people watched in silence as a police captain handcuffed a waitress for looking suspicious. Not one voice rose to stop it. Then the ballroom doors opened, and a man walked in. His eyes found Maya instantly, wrists bound, standing exposed in the center of the room. His fist tightened. Crow never glanced toward the door. He had no idea that everything he had built over his long career was already over. Maya Ellison was 28, a third-year law student at Georgetown who had earned a place on the dean's list semester after semester. That night she was serving champagne to people who spent more on a single table than she earned in a year. The annual Children's Hope Foundation Gala was the kind of evening where senators traded favors between courses and lobbyists wrote six-figure checks before dessert. Every table cost $25,000. The guest list read like a directory of Washington power. The catering crew, Maya's crew, entered through the service doors at the back. She didn't mind. For years she had picked up shifts with prestige events like this one. Good money, flexible hours, and it kept her out of her father's wallet. That independence mattered more than anything. He had offered to pay for law school countless times. She had refused every single time. Her father had earned everything the hard way. She intended to do the same. In the kitchen, Chef Tyrone Reed was already commanding the line with the presence of a retired linebacker. He had run prestige events for many years. Tyrone had known Maya since she was a little girl. He had watched her grow up, watched her lose her mother, watched her turn that grief into fuel. "Baby girl," he said when he spotted her tying her apron, "you look just like your mama tonight." Maya touched the thin gold bracelet on her wrist, the only piece of jewelry she ever wore. Her mother had worn it every single day until she couldn't anymore. "She would have hated this gala," Maya said softly. "Too many politicians." Tyrone chuckled. "She would have hated the appetizers, too. Stuffed mushrooms. Your mama thought mushrooms were the devil's vegetable." Maya smiled, the kind of smile that hurts a little, the kind that comes from remembering someone who should still be here. Her phone buzzed in her apron pocket. She glanced at the screen, expression softening, then silenced it and slipped it away. "You not going to get that?" Tyrone asked. "Later, I'm working." He shook his head, stubborn and proud all at once. Maya picked up her tray, straightened her shoulders, and walked into the ballroom. The contrast hit immediately. The service hallway had fluorescent lights, concrete floors, and the smell of industrial cleaner. The ballroom glowed with crystal chandeliers, gold-trimmed columns, and a soaring ceiling draped in silk. Women moved in gowns worth more than a semester's tuition. Men wore tuxedos with watches that cost more than Maya's car. She moved through the room the way she always did, invisible, efficient, completely professional. A tray of champagne flutes balanced on her left hand, a polite smile for every guest, eye contact with no one. That was the trick. Serve, then disappear. You didn't exist unless someone needed a refill. Maya was good at it. Maybe too good. Elena Vargas, the event coordinator, rushed past with her clipboard and her usual look of permanent panic. She stopped to adjust a centerpiece at the VIP table near the stage. The table was empty. A gold placard marked the spot for the keynote speaker. "He's never late," Elena muttered to her assistant. The empty chair sat like a held breath. Nobody noticed it yet. Captain Harlan Crow walked into the ballroom as if he owned the building. Broad-shouldered in his sharply pressed dress uniform, He carried decades on the Metropolitan Police Force and the last several years were heading the Special Events Division. He shook hands with a congressman, clapped a deputy chief on the back, laughed at a joke that probably wasn't funny. Crow loved these events, not for the cause or the food, but because here he wasn't just a cop. He was the authority, the gatekeeper, the man who decided who belonged and who didn't. He positioned himself near the main entrance and scanned the crowd. His eyes moved from face to face until they found her, Maya, carrying a tray across the floor in her black uniform, gold bracelet catching the light as she moved with quiet confidence through a sea of pale gowns and pale faces. Something tightened in Crow's jaw. He leaned toward his partner, Officer Caleb Stone, a young man still idealistic enough to believe the badge stood for something pure. "That one," Crow said. "The girl with the tray. Keep your eyes on her." Caleb looked at Maya and saw only a woman doing her job. "She's catering staff, Captain." "I know what she is. Just watch her." Caleb's jaw tightened. He said nothing, but something cold settled in his stomach. He had heard Crow talk like this before. About the parking attendant at the governor's reception, about the coat check girl at the opera fundraiser. Always the same tone, always the same target. He pulled out his phone and pretended to check a message, hands unsteady. Across the ballroom, Maya set down a fresh tray and paused near the kitchen pass-through. Chef Tyrone caught her eye through the window and gave her a thumbs up. She nodded back. Then her phone buzzed again. Same caller. She looked at it for a long moment, warmth mixed with something heavier, before silencing it. Elena Vargas checked the empty VIP table once more, smoothing the tablecloth and glancing at her watch. Then her eyes drifted across the room to Maya, moving through a crowd that didn't truly see her. Elena had no way of knowing she was looking at the keynote speaker's daughter, and that the night was only beginning to show its true shape. It started with a credential check, as Maya served champagne to a cluster of donors, pouring with practiced grace. Captain Crow stepped directly into her path. He didn't introduce himself. He didn't say, "Excuse me." He looked at her the way a man looks at something stuck to the bottom of his shoe. "Credentials, now." Maya kept her voice even. "My badge is right here, Captain." She turned her lapel so he could see the Prestige Events identification. Photo, name, company logo, everything in order. Crow took the badge, held it up, squinted at it like it was written in a language he didn't trust. He turned it over, ran his thumb across the plastic, then dropped it back against her chest without a word. "I'll be watching you," he said. "Every move." He walked away. Maya stood still for a few seconds, then picked up her tray and went back to work. Her hand trembled once. Just once. She pressed it flat against the tray until it stopped. Chef Tyrone saw it from the pass-through. His grip tightened around his spatula. The cook beside him put a hand on his arm. "Don't," the young man whispered. "Not here." Tyrone didn't move, but his eyes never left Crow. Soon after, a white server, a young man new to the crew, tripped near the senator's table. A full glass of red wine hit the white tablecloth, then the floor, splattering the senator's wife's ivory dress. The server stammered an apology. Crow stood only 15 feet away. He looked over, shrugged, and looked away. No credential check, no interrogation, no threats. Nothing. Maya saw it. The donors at the nearby table saw it. Councilwoman Vivian Brooks, seated a few tables away, had been watching Crow since the credential check. Now she pulled out her phone and started recording. She didn't say anything yet. Her thumb simply stayed on the record button. The contrast was surgical. A black woman with perfect credentials had been stopped, searched, and threatened. A white man had shattered a glass on a senator's wife and received nothing more than a shrug. Same room, same uniform, same job, different skin. That was the system working exactly as designed. Crow returned to his post near the entrance and keyed his radio. His voice was low, but clear enough for Caleb to hear. "Run a background check on the Ellison girl. Catering badge says Prestige Events. Something about her doesn't sit right. I want to know everything." Caleb's stomach dropped. He had watched the credential check. He had watched Crow ignore the white server. He knew exactly what this was. But Crow was his commanding officer, with decades of experience against his own short time on the force. "Copy that," Caleb said, hating the taste of the words. The name Ellison entered the department database. Somewhere in those records it connected to another Ellison at the same address, one whose title outranked every badge in the building. But that connection would surface too late. By then, Crow would have already crossed every line that mattered. Back in the ballroom, Maya set down her tray at the service station. She flexed her fingers, took a steadying breath, and pulled herself together the way black women have had to pull themselves together in hostile rooms for generations. She didn't call anyone. She didn't complain. She simply picked up a fresh tray and walked back into the crowd. Chef Tyrone watched her go. "Lord, give that girl strength," he whispered to himself. He didn't know how much she would need. At the VIP table, near the stage, the chair remained empty. The keynote speaker placard caught the light every time a server passed. Elena Vargas checked her phone again. No message, just an empty chair and a clock that kept ticking. The second confrontation came as Maya delivered the main course to another table. Grilled filet and roasted vegetables plated with the kind of precision that spoke of expensive ingredients. She set each plate down with care, smiled at the guests, and stepped back. Then Crow appeared behind her, close enough that she could smell his cologne, close enough that the guests at the table stopped eating. "Empty your pockets." Maya turned slowly. "Excuse me. You heard me. A piece of jewelry went missing from the coat check a little while ago. You're the only one who's been moving through that area unsupervised." It was a lie. The coat check was staffed by hotel employees. Maya hadn't been anywhere near it all evening. The guests at the table knew it. The hotel manager knew it. Anyone paying attention for more than a few minutes knew it. But Crow had a badge. And in America, a badge could turn a lie into a lawful order. "Captain, I haven't been near the coat check. You can verify that with hotel security." "I'm not asking hotel security, I'm asking you. Pockets, now." Maya looked at the guests at the table. 6 wealthy faces stared at their plates. Not one pair of eyes met hers. Not one man spoke up to say what everyone already knew, that this had nothing to do with jewelry. She emptied her apron slowly, one item at a time. A pen, her phone, a small notepad filled with catering shorthand, a tube of lip balm. She placed each on the white tablecloth beside plates of expensive filet. Crow picked up each item, turned it over, examined it like evidence, then dropped it back onto the table without a word. He picked up her phone last and held it, glancing at the screen. Maya's jaw tightened. "That's my personal property. Everything on this table is subject to inspection." He set the phone down. The screen had been dark, but moments earlier, it had lit up with an incoming call. The caller ID had read, "Dad." Crow hadn't noticed, but one of the guests at the table had. She stared at the phone, then at Maya, then back at the phone. Something was beginning to connect in her mind, though she couldn't quite grasp it yet. Crow wasn't satisfied. He was never going to be satisfied, because this was never about jewelry. It was about a black woman who carried herself with too much confidence in a room where he expected her to shrink. He straightened and spoke loud enough for surrounding tables to hear. "I'm going to need you to come with me to the service hallway for a more thorough search. Standard procedure." There is no standard procedure for searching catering staff without a filed complaint. "Are you refusing a direct order from a police captain?" "I'm exercising my constitutional rights." The words hung in the air like smoke. Guests at 3 surrounding tables heard every syllable. Forks froze. Conversations died. The ballroom seemed to develop its own gravity, with Maya Ellison at its center. Elena Vargas appeared from near the stage, face flushed, clipboard trembling. "Captain, please. She's one of our best. Can we handle this quietly? The donors are watching." Crow turned on her with a look that could crack glass. Are you obstructing a security operation, ma'am? Because I can have you removed too. Elena opened her mouth, closed it, took a step back, then another. Then she was gone, swallowed by the crowd as if she had never been there. Maya was alone, in the kitchen. Chef Tyrone watched through the pass-through window. His entire body had gone rigid. He took one step toward the door. The young cook beside him grabbed his arm with both hands. "Chef, don't. He'll arrest you on the spot. You know he will." Tyrone's eyes were wet, not from sadness, but from the kind of rage that has nowhere to go. The kind black men learn to swallow before they even learn to read. "That's my baby girl out there," he said. "I know, and the best thing you can do for her right now is stay here." Tyrone didn't move. His hands shook at his sides. Crow led Maya toward the service hallway. Every step was visible to the guests. He walked behind her, close and proprietary, like a man escorting a prisoner. Maya's back remained straight. Her chin stayed lifted. She would not give this room the image of a broken woman. The hallway was colder, lit by harsh fluorescent lights. The floor bare concrete. The glamour of the ballroom vanished the moment they crossed the threshold. This was the part of the hotel guests weren't meant to see, the part where the real work happened, where people like Maya existed before they became invisible servers in black uniforms. "Turn around. Hands behind your back." "On what charge?" "Suspicion of theft and failure to comply with a lawful security directive. You haven't identified any stolen property. You haven't filed an incident report. You haven't contacted hotel security to confirm the alleged theft. Captain, I'm a third-year law student. I know what probable cause requires, and this isn't it." For the first time all evening, something flickered in Crow's eyes. Not doubt, not guilt, annoyance, the kind a man feels when the person he's trying to break refuses to break. "You can file a complaint tomorrow. Right now you're being detained." The click of the handcuffs echoed as cold steel closed around her wrists. The left cuff pressed directly against her mother's gold bracelet. The metal bit into the delicate chain. Maya's eyes closed for one brief second. When they opened, they were clear. From the hallway entrance, a voice rang out, not a whisper but a clear declaration. "Thank goodness someone is finally taking security seriously." Margaret Langford stood there in her pearl necklace and Chanel dress, a founding donor of the Children's Hope Foundation. She held a champagne glass in one hand and a smile on her face, performing for the small crowd that had gathered to watch. Several guests nodded along. A few others looked away in shame. The room was splitting, and those who stayed silent were just as responsible as those who spoke. Maya said nothing. She stood with her hands behind her back, cuffed in a service hallway, and looked at Margaret Langford with an expression that would stay with that woman for the rest of her life. Not anger, not hatred, recognition, as if Maya had seen that face 1,000 times before, on 1,000 different women, in 1,000 different rooms. Then 3 things happened in quick succession. First, Officer Caleb Stone stepped away from Crow and walked to the far end of the hallway. He pulled out his phone, fingers shaking so badly he had to try twice before connecting. When the line answered, he whispered 4 words. "Sir, you need to come." Second, outside the hotel, a black SUV with tinted windows pulled up to the main entrance. No sirens, no lights. The driver stepped out and opened the rear door. A man in a dark suit emerged, buttoned his jacket once, adjusted his lapel pin, and walked toward the entrance with the kind of stride that cleared a path without asking. Third, Elena Vargas, standing near the ballroom stage, looked down at her event program. Her eyes moved from the empty VIP table to the hallway where Maya stood handcuffed. Her lips moved as she read the keynote speaker's name. Then she read it again. Her face drained of color. She looked at the hallway. She looked at the program. She connected the 2 pieces of information that every person in the building had missed. The keynote speaker's last name was Ellison. The handcuffed waitress's last name was Ellison. Elena's clipboard hit the floor. On Maya's phone, still sitting on the table where Crow had left it after his inspection, The screen lit up once more. Dad. Missed call. The commissioner was only minutes away now, and Captain Harlan Crow, standing in a service hallway with his hand on a pair of handcuffs he should never have touched, had no idea what was coming. The ballroom doors didn't swing open casually. They were pulled open by hotel staff with the deliberate formality usually reserved for heads of state. Two men in suits entered first, scanning the room with trained eyes. Then the man himself stepped through. Commissioner Darius Ellison, tall and broad-shouldered, carried himself with the quiet authority of someone who had spent decades protecting a city. His dark suit was impeccable. His Metropolitan Police lapel pin caught the chandelier light. His shoes clicked against the marble floor with a rhythm that made conversations falter before people even understood why. He was the first black commissioner in the history of the D.C. Metropolitan Police. He had cleaned up troubled districts, testified before Congress on police reform, and made senators shift uncomfortably in their seats. Every officer in the city either admired him or feared him. Tonight, he was supposed to deliver a keynote about the future of community policing. Instead, he was about to find his daughter in handcuffs. Elena Vargas reached him first, shaking so hard her words came out in fragments. Something about a captain, a waitress, a misunderstanding, the service hallway. She couldn't form complete sentences. Her hands fluttered like trapped birds. Commissioner Ellison listened. His face didn't change. Not a muscle twitched. But something behind his eyes shifted. A stillness any veteran officer would recognize immediately. It was the calm before an earthquake. "Where?" he said. One word. That was all Elena needed. She pointed toward the service hallway. He walked. The crowd parted. Not because anyone told them to, but because something in the way he moved made standing in his path feel dangerous. Guests stepped aside the way water parts for the bow of a ship. Whispers rippled outward. Phones came out. Councilwoman Vivian Brooks lowered her phone for the first time in a long while. She had been recording since the credential check. Now, she watched the commissioner cross the ballroom, and her political instincts told her something historic was about to unfold. She hit record again. The commissioner turned the corner into the service hallway. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. The concrete floor was cold. The glamour of the ballroom was gone. And there was Maya, his daughter who had refused his money, worked double shifts, and carried her mother's bracelet, like a shield against a world that never stopped testing her. She stood with her hands behind her back, steel cuffs around her wrists. Her mother's gold bracelet, the one his wife had worn every single day for years, was pinched between metal and skin. A red mark was already forming where the chain dug into her wrist. Her uniform was still perfect. Her posture was still straight. Her eyes were dry. That was what broke him. Not the handcuffs, not the hallway. The fact that his daughter had trained herself not to cry in moments like this. That she had lived through enough moments like this to develop the skill. For several long seconds, nothing happened. No voices, no dialogue, only the buzz of fluorescent lights and the distant murmur of 300 people holding their breath. Father and daughter stared at each other across 10 feet of concrete floor. Then Maya spoke. "Hi, Dad." 2 words. They landed like a grenade in a library. Crow heard them first. His brain processed them second. His face processed them third. The blood drained from his cheeks in stages, as if someone were emptying him from the inside. His mouth opened, closed, opened again. "Dad," she said again, softer this time. He turned and looked at Commissioner Ellison for the first time. Really looked. The lapel pin, the suit, the 2 plainclothes officers flanking him. The face he had seen in department bulletins, and the framed portrait hanging in every precinct in the city. His commanding officer, the man who controlled every badge, every promotion, every disciplinary hearing in the entire Metropolitan Police Department. And he had just called this man's daughter a dirty black dog and put her in handcuffs. Crow tried to speak. What came out was barely human. "Commissioner Ellison, sir. I was just..." This is a routine security. There was a report of take the cuffs off my daughter. 7 words, spoken at a volume just above a whisper. They carried more authority than anything Crow had ever said in his entire career. The word daughter detonated. It traveled from the hallway into the ballroom in seconds. Margaret Langford's champagne glass slipped from her fingers and shattered on the marble floor. Elena Vargas covered her mouth with both hands. A gasp moved through the crowd like a wave, growing louder as it spread. Crow's hands shook so badly he couldn't find the key on his belt. It took him 3 attempts to unlock the cuffs while the commissioner watched, and Maya stood perfectly still, letting him fumble. The cuffs came off. Maya brought her hands forward slowly. She rubbed her right wrist first, then her left, the one with the bracelet. The gold chain had left a thin red impression, in the shape of her mother's love. She didn't step toward her father. She didn't collapse. She didn't cry. She simply looked at him and held his gaze. In that look was everything she couldn't say in front of all these people. I'm okay. I handled it. I didn't call you on purpose. The system should work without a phone call to the commissioner. He understood. Because she was his daughter. And she was exactly like him. Then, Commissioner Ellison turned to face Captain Crow, and the hallway became a courtroom. Captain, explain to me, in front of every person within earshot, the probable cause that justified placing handcuffs on a credentialed service worker at a charity event. Crow swallowed. Sir, there was a report of missing jewelry from the coat check. Was there? Show me the report. Silence. Show me the victim's statement. Silence. Show me the incident number you logged before initiating a search and detention. Silence. The commissioner took 1 step forward, just 1. But it closed the distance in a way that made Crow step backward into the wall. I've reviewed your record, Captain. Multiple excessive force complaints over the years. All of them involving civilians of color. All of them buried by your division commander. That pattern ends tonight. He turned to address the crowd, now packed into the hallway entrance, phones raised with red recording lights blinking. Councilwoman Vivian Brooks stood in the front row, steady as stone. What happened in this hallway is not an isolated incident. It is a system failure. Captain Crow bypassed every protocol this department has built over decades of reform. He conducted a search without probable cause. He fabricated a theft report to justify a detention. He physically restrained a civilian who had committed no crime, violated no law, and posed no threat. And he did all of this to the only black server in this room, while a white server shattered a glass 10 feet from him without receiving so much as a glance. That is not security, that is profiling. And in my department, profiling is not a policy. It is a fireable offense. The silence was absolute. 300 people, 0 sound. Then Councilwoman Vivian Brooks stepped forward. Commissioner, I witnessed the entire interaction from the beginning. Captain Crow conducted an unprovoked credential check on Miss Ellison within minutes of her entering the ballroom. He ignored an identical incident involving a white server. I have the full sequence on video. She held up her phone, the screen glowing. A second voice, younger and shaking, spoke up. Officer Caleb Stone stepped out from behind 2 guests, face pale, hands clasped in front of him to keep them from trembling. Sir, I need to report something. Every eye shifted to him. There was no jewelry report. No theft was called in. No victim came forward. Captain Crow instructed me to. His exact words were, find a reason to remove her. I followed that order. I shouldn't have. I should have reported it immediately. I failed. The room erupted, not in applause, but in the sound of 300 people exhaling shock at the same time. Murmurs became voices. Voices became accusations. Margaret Langford tried to slip toward the exit. Someone blocked her path, not physically, but simply by staring, until she stopped moving. Crow wheeled on Caleb Stone. You're done, Stone. You hear me? I will end you. Captain Crow. The commissioner's voice cut through the noise like a blade. Calm, precise, final. You are relieved of duty, effective immediately. You will surrender your badge and service weapon to Officer Stone right now. You will report to Internal Affairs tomorrow morning. Failure to appear will result in an arrest warrant. Do you understand these instructions? Crow's hand moved to his badge. It hovered there. For decades, that badge had been his identity, his authority, his armor. It had let him walk into any room and decide who mattered and who didn't. It had let him grab a woman's wrist and call her a dog and believe he was keeping order. He unclipped it. The sound was small, a tiny metallic click, barely louder than a whisper. But in that hallway, it sounded like a career hitting the floor. He placed the badge in Caleb Stone's open palm, then his weapon. Caleb's hand closed around both. He didn't look at Crow. He couldn't. The commissioner turned to Maya. The courtroom dissolved. The crowd disappeared. The cameras stopped mattering. It was just a father looking at his daughter. "Are you hurt?" "No, sir." He looked at her wrists, at the red marks where steel had pressed against gold, at the bracelet that had once clasped around his wife's wrist every morning, now bearing the imprint of handcuffs that should never have existed. His jaw tightened. His eyes glistened. He blinked once, controlled it, held it. "You handled that with more grace than most officers I've ever commanded." She almost smiled. The almost was the whole story, because a full smile would have meant this was over. And it wasn't over. It would never be fully over. But this moment right here was a start. "I learned from the best," she said. The applause began at the back of the hallway. One person, then 5, then 50, then everyone within earshot. Not polite applause. The raw, unfiltered, full-body release of a room full of people who had just watched something true happen in a world drowning in performance. Maya stood in the center of it, hands free, back straight, her mother's bracelet on her wrist catching the light. She didn't bow, she didn't wave, she simply stood there and let the room see her fully, completely, for the first time all night. Not as a server, not as a suspect, not as a victim, as Maya Ellison, law student, daughter, the woman who stood her ground when every system in the room told her to kneel. This story makes the blood boil. Imagine standing there, handcuffed and humiliated for the crime of being black in a fancy room. 300 people watching, not one of them saying a word. If her father hadn't walked through that door, Crow would have walked away free once again. Think about that. The consequences came swiftly, faster than Crow could have imagined, faster than he deserved. Formal charges were filed against Captain Harlan Crow: unlawful detainment, abuse of authority, filing a false security report, conduct unbecoming an officer. After decades on the force, it took one night to undo it all. His prior excessive force complaints, the ones his division commander had quietly buried, were reopened. Each one involved a civilian of color. Each one followed the same pattern. A confrontation manufactured from nothing, escalated by Crow, then covered up with vague language and missing documentation. The pattern was so consistent it could have been a training manual for everything policing should never be. The police union reviewed the case. They watched the video from Councilwoman Brooks' phone. They listened to Officer Caleb Stone's sworn statement. They read the incident report that didn't exist because Crow had never filed one. Then they did something they almost never do. They declined to represent him. Crow was suspended without pay. His desk was cleared by the next day. His nameplate was removed from his office door. After decades of service, the only thing left was a rectangle of clean paint where the nameplate used to be. The missing jewelry, the entire foundation of Crow's manufactured case, was found shortly after the incident. A guest had left a pearl bracelet in the pocket of her coat at the coat check. The attendant had logged it in the lost and found drawer. It had never been stolen. It had never been missing. It had been exactly where it was supposed to be the entire time. Just like Maya. Margaret Langford's reckoning came from the internet, and the internet does not forgive. Cell phone footage of her standing at the hallway entrance, champagne in hand, smiling as she said, "Thank goodness someone is finally taking security seriously," while a black woman stood handcuffed behind her, went viral within hours. Millions of views in just a few days. Her name trended across every platform. The Children's Hope Foundation board held an emergency session and removed her by unanimous vote. Her PR team released a statement claiming her words were taken out of context. The context was a 15-second video. There was no other context to take. Officer Caleb Stone requested a transfer the morning after the gala. He didn't want a promotion. He didn't want a commendation. He asked to be reassigned to the Community Affairs Division, the unit that works directly with civilian oversight boards and neighborhood organizations. His transfer was approved the same day. In his written statement, Caleb included a single paragraph that was later read aloud at a city council hearing. "I was trained to follow my commanding officer. I should have been trained to follow my conscience. I watched Captain Crow target an innocent woman, and I did nothing until it was almost too late. That failure is mine. I will carry it, and I will make sure it never happens again." Councilwoman Vivian Brooks didn't waste time. Within a week, she introduced a comprehensive reform package to the D.C. City Council, requiring body cameras for all officers assigned to private events, mandatory bias training certification for the Special Events Division, and an independent review process for any detention at a non-police venue. It passed unanimously. That same evening, Commissioner Darius Ellison delivered his keynote address. The ballroom was full, every seat taken, people standing along the walls. The energy was different from what it had been just hours earlier, heavier, more awake, the kind of energy that fills a room after the truth has been dragged into the light, and everyone is still adjusting to the brightness. He spoke about the history of policing in America, about the weight of the badge, about the sacred covenant between officers and the communities they swear to protect. He cited data from a Department of Justice study showing that Black Americans are 20% more likely to experience force during police encounters, even when controlling for every other variable. He referenced a Stanford study, analyzing 95 million traffic stops that found consistent racial disparities in who gets searched, who gets cited, and who gets to drive away with a warning. Then he set his notes aside, looked out at the room, and spoke from a place no speechwriter could have scripted. "A badge is not a crown. It is a covenant, and tonight in this room, that covenant was broken by the very person entrusted to uphold it. If we cannot police ourselves, we have no right to police anyone else." A standing ovation followed, not the polite kind. The kind where people stand because sitting feels like silence, and they are done being silent. After the applause, after the speeches, after the last donor shook the last hand and the last car pulled away from the Meridian Grand Hotel, the ballroom was empty. Maya sat alone at the staff table, near the kitchen pass-through. Her catering uniform was still pressed. Her mother's bracelet rested gently against her wrist, no longer pinched under steel. Her constitutional law textbook lay open in front of her. She had been reading the same paragraph for 10 minutes without absorbing a word. Her father sat down beside her. No title, no lapel pin, no commissioner, just Darius, just Dad. He didn't speak immediately. He looked at the bracelet, at the faint red line still visible on her wrist, at his daughter who had stood in a room full of power and refused to let it crush her. "You could have called me the second he approached you." "I know. Why didn't you?" Maya closed her textbook. She looked at him with eyes that held 28 years of navigating a world that was never designed for her. "Because the system should work without a phone call to the commissioner." "That's the whole point, Dad." He stared at her for a long moment. He was not the commissioner. He was a father sitting across from the woman his daughter had become. A woman who believed in the system enough to let it fail her so she could fight to fix it. He nodded slowly. "Your mother would have said the exact same thing." Maya touched the bracelet. I know. He put his arm around her. She leaned into him. The gold bracelet caught the last of the chandelier light, the same light that had watched everything from the first insult to the final ovation. The ballroom was quiet. The night was over. But the story wasn't. In the months that followed, Maya Ellison walked across a stage in a black gown and heels her mother would have loved to see. She passed the bar exam on her first attempt and finished among the top of her class. Georgetown Law handed her a diploma, and the next morning she accepted a position at one of the most respected civil rights law firms in Washington, D.C. Their specialty, police accountability. Her first case file landed on her desk before she had finished unpacking her office. A black teenager detained at a shopping mall for looking like he was about to steal something. No evidence, no charges, no incident report, just a security guard with a hunch and a pair of handcuffs. Maya read the file. She closed it. She opened it again. She knew this story. She had lived this story. She picked up the phone and called the boy's mother. Officer Caleb Stone stood before the D.C. City Council one morning in support of the reform legislation Councilwoman Brooks had introduced after the gala. The chamber was full. Camera crews lined the back wall. Caleb testified for an extended period, describing in clinical detail how Captain Crow had instructed him to find a reason to remove Maya Ellison. He explained the pressure of rank, the fear of retaliation, the silence that becomes complicity when good officers choose comfort over conscience. When he finished, Councilwoman Brooks asked him one question. Officer Stone, if you could go back to that night, what would you do differently? He didn't hesitate. I would have spoken up the moment he told me to watch her. Not after the handcuffs. Not after the phone call. The moment I knew it was wrong, because that's when it mattered. Everything after that was just damage control. The council voted unanimously to pass the resolution. Caleb received a commendation for moral courage, the first of its kind issued to an officer who had testified against his own commanding officer. He kept the commendation in his desk drawer, not on the wall. He said he hadn't earned the wall yet. Captain Harlan Crow pleaded no contest to 2 felony charges. His attorney negotiated a deal. In exchange for a reduced sentence, Crow would participate in a national law enforcement bias training program, as a case study, not as an instructor, as the lesson. His first session was held in a conference room in Arlington, Virginia. 46 active duty officers sat in rows of folding chairs. A facilitator stood at the front with a projector and a screen. The video played, Councilwoman Brooks's footage. 15 minutes of unedited truth, from the credential check to the handcuffs to the moment Commissioner Ellison turned the corner and found his daughter. Crow sat in the back row. He watched himself grab Maya's wrist. He watched himself search her pockets. He heard his own voice say the words he had convinced himself weren't that bad. He watched 300 people say nothing. He watched himself put handcuffs on a woman whose only crime was existing in a room while black. The video ended. The facilitator asked if anyone had questions. Crow didn't speak. Not for the rest of the session, not during the break, not on the drive home. For the first time in his long career, he had nothing to say. Redemption isn't a single moment. It's a direction. Crow had chosen one direction for decades. Maybe now he could choose a different one. Maybe not. That's his road to walk. But Maya chose her direction a long time ago. She chose to build. She chose to stand. She chose to believe the system can be better. Not because it is, but because people like her are in it. Every single day, someone is judged not by their actions, but by their appearance. Every single day, someone with power decides who belongs and who doesn't. Every single day, someone chooses to stay silent. Don't be that someone. The next Maya Ellison might be your daughter, your sister, your neighbor, your friend, and she deserves a world that sees her for who she is, not what someone else decided she should be. If this story made you feel something, don't let that feeling disappear. When you scroll to the next video, share it. Not for the algorithm, not for the likes. Share it because silence is how these stories keep repeating. Like this story. Subscribe to this channel. Leave a comment. Tell me, have you ever been judged before you were given a chance to speak? Your story matters. Tell it. And remember, what if Maya hadn't had a father with that kind of power? What if nobody had walked through that door? That's the reality for thousands of people, every single day. Don't just watch. Speak up. Share this. Like. Subscribe. Your silence is someone else's handcuffs.